So Representative Tarleton, let's absolutely give you the floor here. So I just want to introduce you by way of saying that you have an extraordinary background by any measure. You started your career with the Defense Intelligence Agency in D.C. You worked at the University of Washington as Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations. You were the Seattle Port Commissioner. I'm not going to ask you to run down your whole CV, but I will just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Secretary of State.
Thanks very much for the brief bio. And Stephen, I am running for Secretary of State precisely because of my background. I have decades of experience working on very serious national security issues, dealing with threats to our nation and to our communities. I was a port commissioner when the Great Recession hit, and we lost, 750,000 jobs in this state. And so this crisis that we are going through right now is yet another experience of a crisis which can disrupt our way of life, especially disrupt our ability to conduct elections. And boy, haven't we been seeing that around the country. I actually made the decision to run a statewide race against a two-term incumbent last December because I knew that we were not having enough attention paid to how we protect our right to vote, how we secure our elections against any kind of interference, foreign or domestic. And right now, of course, we have a completely different kind of an emergency, and the incumbent is not prepared for this one, just as she has not been preparing us for the risk of an interference from any kind of party. I am running to make sure we secure our vote, that every vote will be counted, and that if there is an event while we are conducting the elections, we figure out how to continue to do it, because we have vote by mail. We have ballot drop boxes. We have free postage. We need to know that we are going to vote in August and November, despite what President Trump wants to do and despite what the Secretary of State asked our governor to do, which was to cancel these April elections that we are undertaking right now. We should never have a situation where we are canceling our right to exercise our right to vote in this unique American democracy. And that's why I'm in the game.
Terrific. And I have some very specific questions for you coming about election security and the like. I will just ask you, for people who may not be familiar, give us a layperson's definition of what the Secretary of State does.
Great question. The Secretary of State actually oversees the elections. The election schedules are established by the state legislature and approved into law each year. The Secretary of State oversees the posting of the votes that are processed by every single local auditor, or some counties call them elections officials. There are 39 of them. They each run their own operations. They are funded primarily at the local level by the counties. Piece of legislation I got passed this year with overwhelming bipartisan support and signed into law by the governor. For the first time in decades, we'll actually have the state funding the state and federal elections for the local jurisdictions, which should free up some funding for them to do much more voter education and awareness to help people know where they can vote and why they should vote.
Great. Well, I want to circle back to all of that, but for right now, I'm going to switch over to Representative Pellicciotti and give him an opportunity to introduce himself. As I said in the introduction, he is representative for the 30th Legislative District. He is a Fulbright scholar who has worked as a King County Deputy Prosecuting Attorney and also as an Assistant Attorney General here in the state. So, Representative Pellicciotti, just tell us a little bit more about your background and why it's led you to run for treasurer.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Stephen, for having me, and it's a pleasure to join Gail today. Gail's been such a great leader in our caucus and in the legislature, so it's a real pleasure to be with her today as well. And obviously, thank you to everyone with Indivisible and all the Indivisibles around the state who are joining us today. I'll start with the fact that you were mentioning about some of my background related to working as Assistant Attorney General and a lot of issues along those lines. But, my original background, you mentioned my Fulbright scholarship, was in economic development, and was really a focus on really sustainable economic development and making sure that, especially in challenging economic times, we address ways to really develop the economies that best work for everyone. I've got my background, my bachelor's degree in business administration. Those summers I spent, all the interns I spent at that time were in finance and doing stock conversions and issues like that. And I ended up getting my law degree later and prosecuted a range of cases, including economic crimes at the King County Prosecutor's Office, and then eventually joined the Attorney General's Office, where I managed our state's efforts to combat corporate healthcare fraud and dealt with a range of issues around the way corporate structures were set up, and crimes in nursing homes, for example, and making sure that corporate structures and financial fraud wasn't occurring in a way that was really detrimental to seniors. And so all my background before joining the legislature was on issues along those lines, which is one of the reasons when I first ran for office in 2016, I actually ran against a multi-term Republican incumbent, and it was a tough race. I mean, it ended up being $1 million race between both sides, because by beating that multi-term Republican incumbent, we held on to the House of Representatives. Democrats held on to the majority of the House of Representatives by one vote in 2016. And then when the Democrats won in the Senate, when Maka Dingler won in the Senate that following year, we ended up having a majority in the legislature. And so, I'm no stranger to taking on Republican incumbents, and now I'm taking on a Trump-supporting Republican incumbent, somebody who has publicly stated his support in the past for Donald Trump, is continuing to restate his support for Donald Trump. And usually when I bring that up to people related to the fact of our Trump-supporting Republican incumbent treasurer, people don't even know that they have who the treasurer is, let alone it's a Trump supporter. And so I think it's really important that we change politics and not just that position, but one of the first things, and I'll wrap up with this, is when I first ran in 2016, I did something that no one else was doing at the time, which is, I rejected all corporate donations. And it's something that I think has been really critical in terms of allowing me to lead on a lot of issues that I care very much about. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about some of the issues I've done with finance and our campaign system. But it's one of the things that I think there is no position in state government where it is more critical to not have corporate campaign donations entanglements than the position of state treasurer that is responsible, either directly or indirectly, for investing over $120 billion of our money, often in corporations. And so
we'll definitely talk about why. And since you have brought that up, I will ask you the flip of what I asked Representative Tarleton, which is for you to give us just a working definition of what the state treasurer does.
Sure. Well, it's multifaceted. It's actually in our Constitution. It's a rather broad description. It's essentially indicates you have to do what the legislature says, and other than that, it's not nearly as limited as some other statewide positions. But the legislature obviously has directed some very important technical aspects of the office, in which we have a range of career employees who do a lot of important work in terms of moving the money, making sure money's moving among various agencies, and very, very important critical work with that. But one of the things that the office has done previous to our Trump-supporting Republican incumbent is previous to the incumbent, that treasurer serves as the chair of the State Investment Board. And part of that role is making sure that, given our ownership stake in various corporate interests, or I should say our stock ownership in various corporations around the country, be a voice for the state of Washington and making sure that the long-term interests that the state has in those investments is being met, and not just short-term gain. And part of that is teaming up with other like-minded states to make sure we're advancing policies that are truly in the long-term interest of that investment.
That is definitely something that I'm going to want to get into depth with you on in just a moment. I'm going to shift back to Representative